Hello, this is Mark Miller. I am here by myself tonight with Career Pivot. Elizabeth is off at South by Southwest. South by Southwest here in Austin, Texas, consumes the entire city when it comes in. And there are those of us who, this next week I'm going to be headed out. I will not be doing this next Monday because I'll be down in Galveston. And I don't think I can get into Blab, but we'll see. I'll make a decision later in the week to see whether that's going to work. With that, tonight's session is on the 5 things on your resume that make you sound too old. This was a blog post that I wrote back in 2014. And the history behind it is I actually spoke at a resume writers conference in April of 2014. And I don't write resumes. I don't think a lot about resumes. And when I came back, I took one of their little webinars on resume writing. And the resume they used as a sample screamed that this person was old. And so I wrote this blog post, which originally was called, "What Does Your Resume Say About Your Age?" Several months later, I posted on LinkedIn as LinkedIn publisher post. I did that on 8 o'clock on a Monday morning. By 8:30, I had an email from a LinkedIn publisher editor saying, "Would you rename it to 5 things on your resume that make you sound too old?" Well, I did, and it went viral to almost 600,000 views. As you'll notice, almost 2,000 comments. The comments, if you notice, I posted the link to the LinkedIn post. Some of the comments were pretty brutal, and I just thought they were hilarious. So I thought tonight I would kind of go through what are the 5 things on your resume that say you're too old, make you sound too old, and kind of get a discussion because I got religion from a number of people. What I had to say violated their religion, and it's grammatical religion. So the first thing that says you're too old is your email address. In the example they used, the person had an AOL email address. I'm sorry, if you have an AOL email address, you're old. Rather interesting, in this last week, I'm on the board of a nonprofit here, Launchpad Job Club. We just did a major fundraiser, and I was emailing out to a lot of first-degree connections. And yes, bosses. And one of the things I noticed was, oh my gosh, the number of people who I was emailing who had Yahoo email addresses. Wow. If you have a Yahoo email address, you're probably old. So how do you solve this? The easiest way is I have a Northwestern alumni email address. It just forwards to a regular email. There are, you can always go get a Gmail address. A lot of people, when they go do a job search, they go get a separate email address that they will only use for job search. When the job search is done, they can dispose of it. So you can go to Outlook, you can go to Gmail, but or you can go get your own domain. And getting your own domain is much easier now. I happen to have Mark, MARC-Miller.me. Because the number of extensions have been opened up, there are it's much easier to get your own domain. And that way you can, and by the way, for free, you can put a Gmail account. Like my email address is mark@careerpivot.com. Oh, by the way, that's a Gmail account. My wife is lotus@bodyandheart.com. That's a Gmail account. That's a free one. So you can do a customized email address for little or no money, and just go buy your own domain. So that's the first one, your email address. The second is your home address. Now, this is where I get I get recruiters who scream at me. They will say, I have to have your email address. I mean, your home address. And my answer is, why? Because what they want to do is they want to screen you. And so, number one, they don't need it, and they will geographically screen you. Now, this could be something as simple as the neighborhood you live in could be very high end or low end. What I find is more common is being screened out because they don't believe you'll make the commute. I have a client right now who lives in South Jersey. She took a job in North Jersey. We did not tell them where she lived. It's quite a commute. She's making it work. She's spending 2 nights a week with her sister. So she only has to make the commute up once up and once back. And she works from home 1 day a week. And the idea is she's making it work, and she's determining whether she sells her townhouse or whether she rents it out and buys something else or whatever. You don't need to give them your home address. Okay, the next one is what people, again, got really upset with me. Home phone number. Who under 45 has a home phone? Virtually none. So you don't put your home phone number on your resume. You only put your cell phone. Now, I got people screaming at me saying I have to have a home phone. And I'm not telling you not to have a home phone. What I'm telling you is don't put it on your resume. Now, you can go get a Google Voice number, and there are other equivalents to Google Voice that will forward. And in fact, you can have it automatically forward to both a cell phone and a home phone. And I got people screaming at me because after Hurricane Sandy, the cell phones didn't work anymore. Well, fine. Again, Google Voice. If you look at my website, the telephone number on my website is a Google Voice number. In fact, rather interesting, if you leave a message on there, on that number, it will automatically transcribe that message and text it to me and email it to me. And Google Voice is free. So there's that piece. Okay, now we get down to the last two, which are kind of interesting. One is obsolete skills. If this is particularly true of you technical folks. I use the example, I was an MS-DOS control programmer. I was a mainframe guy. Would I ever put that on my resume? The answer is no. So if you've got obsolete skills, you've got skills from the 1970s or the 1980s, skills that are not needed anymore. So the class example, I wouldn't put down that you know how to use MS Office. Everyone should know how to use MS Office. That is not, Paul puts on there COBOL. Skills, unless you are very specifically, like for example, COBOL, when General Motors was setting up their data center here in Austin, they were specifically looking for COBOL programmers. Excuse me. They were specifically looking for COBOL and mainframe. Oh, my brother's a blacksmith. Yeah. Being a blacksmith might be cool. It's not going to get you anywhere. Now, the interesting one was the last one. And this is where I got accused of telling people that they should draw comics of Muhammad. The last one is, if you put 2 spaces after a period, you're old. And so where this came from was at a Launchpad meeting, a resume meeting we had back in 2008 or 2009. We had a number of HR people, unemployed HR people, who basically told us the way where they were screening out older candidates was looking for two spaces after a period. Now, the reality is you don't need two spaces after a period. In fact, if you do put two spaces on your handy dandy iPhone or Android, if you put two spaces, it puts a period in place. With proportional text, you do not need two spaces after a period. Now, a lot of folks in their 30s were taught to always put two spaces after a period. Now, the AP style guide still says two spaces after a period. If you are doing your thesis or your dissertation, it will not be accepted without two spaces after a period. I'm sorry, any place other than that, you do not ever use two spaces after a period. And that is, it comes from the typewriter days and typesetting. Back, for some of you, you may not remember Courier and Elite. There were only two fonts, one 10-point, one 12-point, back in the days of typewriters. And we are long past that. So the idea here is you can write your resume, but there are lots of things that used to be on it you don't need to put. And if you, as I said, you got one of the things that's really hard to break is the two spaces after a period. But if you look at most HTML generated text on the web, there is no two spaces after a period. HTML will take out those extra spaces. So does anybody have, you can type in the text box, does anyone have two spaces after a period on their resume? Go ahead and type in the text box. I'm curious. Or have you all broken the habit? And Stan puts, don't forget the orator typeface. I don't remember orator typeface. Yeah, I don't have a resume. Yes, but I'm going to change. Yes. As I said, I got hate mail. I got hate mail from people who said, damn it, I'm going to put two spaces after a period because that's the right thing to do. And it's the only way of doing it. And the reality is, in today's world, you can blame Steve Jobs for this because he's the one who pushed, he's the one who took calligraphy in college, and that's what drove a lot of the font typefaces that we have today. And you don't need two spaces. So the two ones that tend to really drive people is, number one is putting your home phone number and the two spaces after a period. But really look at your email address. Let's see, Paul wrote, not totally sure now, left and right justified. You always want to left justify your text. Now, full justification kind of looks funky. I don't particularly like it, but it's typically used with textbooks. And if anybody's interested how full justification works, I can actually explain that. I actually implemented that on the IBM display writer and IBM 5520 back in the early 1980s. So with that, the key piece here is number one, not to get screened out by HR because of your age. Your goal here is always to make sure that you look young, you are up to date. This is no different than putting an objective statement on your resume. Objective statements are so, 1980s? They're not used anymore. And so you want to be able to simply say, okay, I am up to date. So with that, I am going to pause the recording and see and unlock the seat.